Lymphatic drainage system of head and neck. Suboccipital mastoid, post or auricular. The mastoid is the post-auricular. Posterior cervical spinal nerve chain. Posterior superficial clavicle chain. Transverse cervical artery chain is the same as this posterior superficial cervical chain. Internal jugular chain. Deep cervical chain. Thyrolingual facial, anterior superficial and deep cervical chain. Okay, anterior superficial and deep cervical chain. Thyrolingual facial, sublingual, submental, submandibular, submaxillary, suprahyoid, retropharyngeal, parotid, preauricular, preauricular. So we'll go clockwise. Preauricular, 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 parotid, 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 paroitid, parotid, retropharyngeal, 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 suprahyoid, 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 submandibular, 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 submandibular. Let's try this again. Submandibular, 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 submandibular. Submaxillary is the same as submandibular. Submental, 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 sublingual, 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 thyrolingual facial, thyrolingual facial, thyrolingual, thyrolingual facial, thyrolingual, thyrolingual facial, thyrolingual facial, anterior superficial and deep cervical chain, anterior anterior, anterior superficial superficial, superficial, and deep deep cervical 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 chain, chain, super anterior superficial and deep cervical chain, internal jugular chain, internal, internal jugular, jugular chain, chain, posterior superficial cervical chain, transverse cervical artery chain, posterior superficial cervical chain, transverse cervical artery chain. It's the same thing. Posterior, 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 superficial, 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 cervical, cervical chain, chain, posterior cervical spinal nerve chain, posterior cervical spinal nerve chain, posterior cervical spinal nerve chain, posterior, posterior cervical, 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 spinal, 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 nerve, 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 chain, chain, mastoid, postauricular, mastoid, mastoid, postauricular, 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 suboccipital, suboccipital, suboccipital. Alright, now counterclockwise. Suboccipital, mastoid, postauricular, posterior cervical spinal nerve chain, posterior superficial cervical chain, also called transverse cervical artery chain, internal jugular chain, anterior superficial and deep cervical chain, thyrolingual facial, sublingual, submental, submandibular, submaxillary, same thing, submandibular or submaxillary, suprahyoid, retropharyngeal, parotid, preauricular, parotid, retropharyngeal, suprahyoid, submandibular, submaxillary, submental, sublingual, thyrolingual facial, anterior superficial and deep cervical chain, internal jugular chain, posterior superficial cervical chain or transverse cervical artery chain, posterior cervical spinal nerve chain, mastoid or postauricular, suboccipital. Schematic section of lymph node. Clockwise. Trabeculae, 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 trabeculae. Efferent vessel, efferent vessel, efferent, effferent, efferent vessel, 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 efferent vessel. Artery, 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 vein, 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 afferent vessels, afferent, afferent vessels, 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 afferent vessels, medullary cord, medullary cord, medullary, medullary cord, cord, cortical follicles, germinal centers, cortical follicles, cortical, follicles, follicles, cortical follicles, trabecular artery and vein, trabecular artery and vein, trabecular, 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 artery, artery, and and vein, vein, trabecular artery and vein, marginal sinus, marginal sinus, marginal sinus, sinus, marginal sinus, medullary cord, medullary cord, medullary cord, cord, fibrous capsule, capsule, fibrous, fibrous capsule, 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 trabeculae, afferent vessel, artery, vein, afferent vessels, medullary cord, cortical follicles, or also germinal centers, trabecular artery and vein, marginal sinus, medullary cord, fibrous capsule, trabeculae, afferent vessel, artery, vein, afferent vessels, medullary cord, cortical follicles, germinal centers, trabecular artery and veins, marginal sinus, medullary cord, fibrous capsule. Respiratory system. Clockwise, superior nasal concha, sphenoid sinus, middle and inferior nasal concha. Pharynx, esophagus, apex of lung, left lung, base of lung, right lung, secondary bronchi, right primary bronchus. Trachea, thyroid gland, larynx, tongue, nostril, vestibule, nasal cavity, frontal sinus. Superior nasal concha, superior nasal concha, superior nasal concha, superior nasal concha, superior nasal concha. Sphenoid sinus, sphenoid sinus, sphenoid sinus, sphenoid sinus, sphenoid sinus, sphenoid sinus, sphenoid sinus. Middle and inferior nasal concha, middle and inferior nasal conchae, middle and inferior nasal conchae, middle and inferior nasal conchae. Pharynx, 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 pharynx. Esophagus, esophagus, esophagus. Apex of lung, apex of lung, apex of lung. Left lung, left lung, left lung. Base of lung, base of lung, base of lung. Right lung, right lung, right lung. Secondary bronchi, secondary bronchi, secondary bronchi. Right primary bronchus, right primary bronchus. Right primary bronchus. Trachea, trachea, trachea. Thyroid gland, thyroid gland, thyroid gland, thyroid gland. Larynx, 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 larynx. Tongue, 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 tongue. Nostril, nostril, nostril. Vestibule, 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 vestibule. Nasal cavity, nasal cavity, nasal cavity, nasal cavity. Frontal sinus, frontal sinus, frontal sinus. Superior nasal concha. Superior, superior, nasal, 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 concha, 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 superior nasal concha, superior nasal concha. Sphenoid sinus, sphenoid sinus, sphenoid sinus, SPHENOID, sinus, SINUS, sphenoid sinus. Middle and inferior nasal concha, middle and inferior nasal concha, MIDDLE and AND, inferior, INFERIOR, inferior nasal, 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 concave, CONCHAE, concave. Pharynx, 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 pharynx. Esophagus, 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 esophagus. Apex of lung, APEX, OFLUNG, apex of lung. Apex, APEX, of OF, lung, LUNG, lung. Left lung, LEFT, LUNG, lung, left lung. Base of lung, BASE, base of OF, of lung, LUNG, base of lung. Right lung, RIGHT, right lung, LUNG, lung. Secondary bronchi, secondary SCONDARY, secondary bronchi, BRONCHI, bronchi. Right primary bronchus, right RIGHT, right primary PRIMARY, primary bronchus, BRONCHUS, bronchus. Trachea, TRACHEA, trachea. Thyroid gland, thyroid, THYROID, thyroid gland, GLAND, gland. Larynx, LARYNX, larynx. Tongue, TONGUE, tongue. Nostril, NOSTRIL, nostril. Vestibule, VESTIBULE, vestibule. Nasal cavity, NASAL, nasal. Cavity, CAVITY, cavity. Frontal sinus, FRONTAL, frontal. Sinus, SINUS, sinus. Alright, now this picture I used for the other one, but this is the structures of nasal passages and throat. Clockwise. Nasopharynx, 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 nasopharynx. Oropharynx, 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 laryngopharynx, 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 esophagus, esophagus, trachea, 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 epiglottis, 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 tongue, tongue, soft palate, softpalate, soft palate, hard palate, hard palate, palate, hard palate, hard palate, nasal pharynx, oral pharynx, laryngopharynx, esophagus, trachea, epiglottis, tongue, soft palate, hard palate, structures of nasal passage and throat, nasal pharynx, oral pharynx, laryngopharynx, esophagus, trachea, epiglottis, tongue, soft palate, hard palate. Structures of nose: nasal bones, frontal process of maxilla, lateral nasal cartilage, septal cartilage, lesser alar cartilages, greater alar cartilages. Nasal bones, frontal process of maxilla, lateral nasal cartilage, septal cartilage, lesser alar cartilages, greater alar cartilages. Structure of nose, now frontal view. Nasal bones, frontal process of maxilla, lateral nasal cartilage, septal cartilage, lesser alar cartilages, greater alar cartilages. Nasal bones, nasal, nasal bones, 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 nasal bones, nasal bones, nasal bones, nasal bones, nasal bones. Frontal process of maxilla, frontal process of maxilla, frontal process of maxilla. Lateral nasal cartilage, lateral nasal cartilage, lateral nasal cartilage, septal cartilage, septal cartilage, septal cartilage, lesser alar cartilages, lesser alar cartilages, lesser alar cartilages, greater alar cartilage, greater alar cartilage, greater alar cartilage.